The question that I'm going to strive to answer today is, what have I been doing since December of 2015 when my last video was uploaded on YouTube? That, my friends, is not an easy question and is going to take a bit to answer, so if you'll just bear with me. Firstly, we'll have to start our journey back just a bit further than December. June of 2015, my wife and I celebrated our 10-year anniversary. It was kind of a big deal, so we decided to book a cruise and see some funny Christian comedians. Making this portion particularly memorable was the presence of the man that wrote and performed my wife and I's wedding song. Not at request, nor did he know it was the exact date of our anniversary, but just by happenstance he performed it that very night on the cruise. The trip was really amazing, and just a few weeks after returning home, I was told that we were expecting our first child. At this point, my wife and I had a tough decision to make. Were we going to be the stereotypical millennial family that would have both parents working while the child is in daycare? Would we be the stereotypical patriarchal family with the daddy working and mommy staying at home? Or would we choose something different altogether? Well, with the best interests of our bank accounts in mind, we decided that since my wife made much more money than I did, I would quit my job and become a stay-at-home dad. This would allow for even more blessings to come our way. With the fact that I was no longer working, I had a decision to make. Was I going to be tithing from this point forward? I technically didn't have an income, so I really wasn't required to give monetarily, but since we had plenty at the time, I decided to continue giving what I had been giving. Shortly after our finances improved, we decided that it was time to get our own place. I wanted to build a house close to my mom and even had an architect draw up the plans for my design. While that was happening, I had begun helping my wife's grandmother out with maintenance on a rental property that had recently been abandoned by the previous tenant. It turned out that the house that I was now taking care of just so happened to be nearly the same size as the house that we had drawn up. The more work I did on this other property, the more I liked it. So one day, in a discussion about the cost of building versus the cost of just buying the old rental property from her grandmother, we decided to ask if it was for sale. Her grandmother not only wanted to sell it to us, but even owner financed and let us decide what the note would be. With the new house note under our belt, I again had to decide what I was going to do about giving. Surely the extra cost would justify giving less, but even after paying the note the first month, our finances really hadn't budged, so I just felt to keep giving at its current rate. I wasn't long after this decision was made that Kristen got a raise at her job, and then, not even a year later, another raise. Raises to the point that now Kristen was making twice the amount weekly that I used to make at my job, and then some. Another financial blessing during all of this was our rental property. Our renter, a good friend of mine, had recently gotten another job and was needing to move. Kristen and I talked it over, and we felt that it would probably never get a renter as good as the one that we had, so instead of renting again, we just decided to sell the property altogether. The real estate agent warned us that things hadn't been selling well, and it might take a really long time to sell. We prayed about what price to ask for it, and barely a month after putting it on the market, a buyer came along and gave us pretty close to what we asked for it. Finances were good, but as usual, life decided that we needed a little rain to keep things interesting. I had been exercising steadily over the last year or more at this point and had actually lost quite a bit of weight. I was down to exactly the weight that I had strived to get down to, and I really wasn't missing the 30 extra pounds. One morning at church, I was talking to my mom and brother, and my brother noticed that I had a large lump on the side of my neck. I really didn't like going to the doctor, and my brother knew this, so he enlisted my mom to tell me to go get my thyroid checked out. Being obedient to my mom, I went. The first time the doctor felt of the lump, her first question was, "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" She sent me for more testing, but I didn't have insurance, so most doctors wouldn't touch me. It took quite a while for my doctor to find anywhere that would take me. With bad news on the blood counts, things looked really bad. I had an ultrasound done that determined that I did in fact have a large mass on my neck. That got me into UTMB, and from there they took a biopsy, which determined that I had a malignant tumor. Even with the thought that I had cancer slowly growing in me, I couldn't help but think that God had all of this in His plan. A lot of prayer was going up at this point, and weeping became a pretty common practice when I was alone. My endocrinologist told me that I needed surgery, and from all the testing and MRIs, that the tumor was covering the entire side of my thyroid, and I had several nodules, so I would have to have a total thyroidectomy. The meeting with the surgeon was scheduled, and at this point I was starting to feel really bad that all the news I was getting seemed to be bad. I went to the surgeon's appointment and sat patiently in the small, cold office. The nurses and student doctors checked me over and gave me the same, "Why didn't you come to us sooner?" line. Couldn't help but chuckle every time someone asked me that. The surgeon came into the room and was certainly not what I expected. She greeted me with a warm smile and was older than I had expected. It honestly felt like I was speaking to my grandmother. It was very reassuring, and I could almost feel peace chasing away the unease that I had been feeling. With a renewed confidence and many people praying, I went into surgery. The anesthesiologist put a mask over my face and said, "This may smell a little funny." I said, "It kind of smells new," thinking that they were speaking of the mask itself. When I opened my eyes, I was being rolled into the recovery room, and my neck was a little sore. After an hour or so, the surgeon and some of her team came in and explained to me that the surgery was a success, and that everything went very well. Over the next 2 days, the recovery went so well that I didn't even have to take any pain medication. The nurse kept asking and insisting that I use the morphine drip, but I honestly wasn't in pain. One of the male nurses said to me that I should be on a poster to show all the other pansy patients on that floor. But I honestly believe that God was keeping me. The view outside of my hospital room seemed to verify that. A few days later, I received the official report from the surgeon. Not only did the surgery go extremely well, but the mass was almost a full centimeter smaller than the MRI had shown. God is good. On the next checkup appointment, the surgeon was in disbelief at how well the incision looked. Nearly all of the sutures had dissolved and everything was looking perfect. I was good to go, and they were going to talk to the endocrinologist to see if I was going to have the radioactive iodine or not. My next appointment was going to be in about a month. A few days after the appointment, I received a bill for the surgery. When you don't have insurance, bills like that can be really daunting. Blessings, on the other hand, can sure take the sting out of that hit, because the bill for everything ended up being less than the price we sold our rental property for. God's timing could not have been more perfect. Speaking of acts of God, no one could have predicted that Hurricane Harvey would hit as hard as it did. Not only did that storm flood all of Houston, including my surgeon's office, but it also devastated my little town of Orange. My appointment was moved back another few weeks, and we had begun the cleanup of Harvey's aftermath. Our home was just above the floodwater, but my mom's house was not. There had been just enough water to flood every room of her house, with several inches of water, ruining everything that touched the floor. Hurricane Harvey hit and flooded most of our city, but our home was spared, and that allowed us to be a blessing to my mom, who moved in with us until her house was livable again. When the next doctor's appointment came around, my endocrinologist told me that she did not recommend doing the RAI uptake, as the side effects of the radiation might outweigh the potential benefits of the procedure. I didn't have to take radioactive iodine, and I've since started my hormone replacement therapy, which is going very well. My life is good, and God's timing is perfect. I have been from mountaintops to valleys and back in these last 2 years. But one thing has remained the same, and always will. My God is good.